I wanted to tell you about some work we've done recently on the impact of AI on the world of work. And this is work that I've done as part of the Wharton Human AI Research. It's a center that does quite a few things, academic conferences and content, but also some reports and white papers for a more applied nature that wouldn't necessarily fly at academic journals. And so this is a resource maybe of interest to many of you. You can join our mailing list and get communication about the new publications and new events. Now, I show you, here's a screenshot from a report we published last year. And so 6 months after ChatGPT came out, we were out in the field collecting data about Gen AI adoptions in organizations. And we now collected 3 waves. The 2025 waves, we got the data only recently, will be published in a few weeks. But these are data from, I want to show you from the previous report. When we did the first data collection in 2023, we asked them questions about whether they believe Gen AI will enhance or replace employee skills. The sample is senior decision makers at large American companies, so not a representative sample of population, but hopefully a fairly representative sample of key decision makers in organizations. And we found in 2023 that the 2 beliefs were high and kind of matched. 80% agreed or strongly agreed it would enhance employee skills, and 75% that it would replace employee skills. Now, let me ask you a question just to break the ice. How do you think the data look like in 2024? You can unmute your mic or type in the chat, whatever is more convenient to you. Sarah says goes down, both? Both, Sarah nods, yeah. More replacement from Vera? It's a hard judgment to make, and to some extent I find it an interesting question because it almost serves as a Rorschach test of what you think people do. But I show you the results. I was somewhat surprised and quite pleased when I saw them. And in 2024, we found a big increase in beliefs about enhancement and a soft decrease in beliefs about replacement. So actually a positive picture. So the technology is not overhyped, meaning it is powerful. People, almost everybody now believes that it will enhance employee skills. But as they learn more about it, they also find that it can't quite do maybe what a human expert can do, although 72% is still very high. But in 2023, basically the 2 were about matched. There was a small gap. And in 2024, there is quite a gap opening up such that senior leaders believe that this technology is mostly going to enhance rather than replace employee skills. In 2025, by the way, we find this pretty much the same numbers as in 2024. I think 90% might be a ceiling of what you can expect in a survey to get. So that's pretty much there. And now this is a promise of Gen AI. If Gen AI can, enhance employee skills, improve the quality and efficiency of work, it's really going to boost productivity. It's going to boost lots of things are positive about organizational outcomes. So they believe it's going to be a catalyst for lots of growth and new opportunities and so on. But clearly, this can only be the case when people actually use it, when they want it to succeed. And there is a lot of stories out there. I'm sure you're familiar with many of them, when people actually show quite a different kind of picture rather than this relatively positive view that I showed you before from the top of organizations. Workers feel threatened. So, you have stories like the Hollywood strike that had AI at its heart. Here's an example I thought was quite striking from Forbes report data from a survey where they find that 40% of Gen Z workers actively sabotaging employers' AI strategy. Clearly, I mean, if this is what half of your people, if half of your young employees are trying to sabotage the strategy, well, it's unlikely to pan out. So this is, I think, a serious concern for organizations. And I've done a lot of work on psychological threat from AI basically, this is how I entered this field about 12 years ago. And so this is one paper in HBR where we review a bunch of papers basically on that topic. And we focus on consumers, but I think the application to work environments, I think, is pretty straightforward. And just last week, a new paper came out in Trends in Cognitive Science where we review a bit more formally the impact of Gen AI on the psychology of work. So it's an invitation for those of you interested in this topic to maybe take a look, as I think it might be quite relevant. And what we do in the paper is that we use a framework that will be familiar to many of you, which is self-determination theory, one of the classic frameworks in social psychology that has been applied countless of times in organizational context. And self-determination theory is a rich theory, but essentially it argues that psychological well-being emanates from three domains: the experience of competence, experience of autonomy, and the experience of relatedness. Okay, so that's basically the core foundation of the theory. And people can experience positive well-being at work through each of those sources of well-being. So, for example, a data analyst may find feeling of pride and self-efficacy when they manage to master a complex analysis. A manager can feel in control of their workflow, and that can give them a sense of autonomy and control over their life. And team members might build meaningful connections with each other during work, which might boost feelings of connection and relatedness. And Leslie, thank you for posting the link to the article. Now, the thing is, just as work can help workers experience psychological well-being, it can also do the opposite. And so those examples, you can flip them on their head, and then you might think about a data analyst that fails at a complex analysis and experience feelings of incompetence. You can imagine a worker feeling that they can't control their workflow. I think this is lack of control and autonomy is one of the main drivers of, say, for example, burnout at work. And a team member may actually feel alienated and struggle to form connections with team members. So these sources can be also barriers to well-being. And Gen AI can play a role there. This is what we are trying to sketch in the paper, building on new research coming out, a lot of them preprints, but essentially in the last 3 years, we made already quite a lot of inroads into understanding the impact of Gen AI on workers, and we try to build on this new literature through the lens of this classic framework to make some predictions. I thought I give you a couple of examples from the lab just to also bring you some data. Let me see if I'll go a bit quick in the interest of time, and if you find these ideas interesting, I'll point you to the academic papers. I'll pick two here. One is threats to competence, where I'm going to talk about this paper on identity-based consumer behavior, where I'll show you just dive straight into one of the studies to give you a sense of the kind of evidence. This is in the domain of cooking. The study was conducted at Erasmus University, so our participant population were Dutch students, and about 400 of them came to the lab, read a product description like in an ad, and rated how much they liked the product. We had 3 between participant conditions where people either read a control product with no automation, basically they were cooking tools, or 2 different types of automated machines for cooking. One was framed as taking care of everything. We call it skill replacing automation. The other one was more involving the consumers into the cooking process. We call it skill allowing automation. And then we measured identity in cooking. And of course, you get a distribution. Some students are really into cooking. Some students don't care at all. And so we measure that trait with items like, to me, cooking is an important part of my life. Okay. Then we, in the 3 conditions, they read a description of the product, and the description is held more or less constant with small changes. In the first condition, these are cooking tools that you need to cook certain recipes, and we list all that. And then the same tools and recipes can be performed by this machine. And I copy here the key sentence in the differentiating the 2 conditions. In one, we say the entire cooking process is completed for you at the touch of a button, skill replacing. And in the other one, the entire cooking process is accomplished by you with the guidance of the machine. The guidance of the machine really makes it feel a bit like the machine is on top, like you are, the machine is boss, and that may not give huge amount of skill allowing feeling, can say, if that's the right expression, but at least it involves more the user. We run a pretest on the same population. We ask them whether the product substitutes or complements the user skills. We find in the control condition is all about complementing, makes sense. These tools don't cook by themselves. In the skill replacing automation condition, it's all about substitution, and this is exactly what we told them, so it makes sense. In the third condition, kind of ambiguous, kind of both, and so it's sort of in between. These are the data from the main study. This is basically the scatter plot of the whole data. We find a positive correlation between product evaluation and identity in the control condition. This is a standard effect in the identity literature. You can call it identity congruence, consumer preference. The more you're into cooking, the more you like cooking products. Not very interesting, perhaps, but interesting as a benchmark against what happens in the other two conditions. In the skill replacing condition, now we find a steeply negative. So the more you're into cooking, the less you like the product. And in the third condition, where we restore control, let's say competence and ability to be involved in the product usage, in the user, we've killed the effect, and this line is not significantly different from zero, the slope. And so this paper basically shows that people want to attribute consumption outcomes to their own skills and effort, and they might resist automation in domains where they feel the product is decreasing the opportunities for them to experience being a particular type of person. Okay, and so I think this is directly applicable to the domain of work, where automation might become a threat when it's seen as inhibiting the ability of a professional identity at work. Okay, so let me go into one more finding quickly. This is on relatedness. The paper came out in Computers and Human Behavior last year. We also have an HBR kind of write-up of it. And this is one of the studies in the paper. We did it together with a company in Germany called Camperboys. This is a company that rents out camper vans, and they were starting to do business at airports, major airports, Munich, Frankfurt, things like that. And they were now targeting also a foreign market, where they would think people would fly into Germany, rent a van, and then go to the Black Forest or whatever. So they needed to start doing some marketing in English. And so they didn't have any English language assets, and so we helped them out. We recruited 1,000 workers on online labor market, and then we asked them to write slogans, which then the company actually implemented. This is one example from an Instagram page of a slogan made by our participants. And so the workers were randomly assigned to one or two conditions, were either supervised by a human manager or by an algorithm, and this was true. Actually, it was actually someone reading the slogans, or there was a customer sentiment analysis algorithms processing the slogans. And then they were given a bonus as a functional performance. And then the only thing that we varied, we cartoonized the photo of the manager or not. And so they basically had these simple cues for algorithmic management. And we wanted to understand what that does to their behavior, to know that their work is being evaluated, judged by an algorithm. In other studies, we look at organizational context rather than the gig economy. So I think we try to extend that context beyond online platforms. And what we did was to measure helping behavior. We wanted to know whether algorithmic management might actually damage pro-social motivation at work, the ability, the intention to help other people. And so we give them, after the end of the study, we tell them, this is a text box, and you can type some tips for workers coming after you if you want to help them to craft a good slogan. And then we just pre-registered as a key-dependent variable the number of characters that they typed into the text box as a measure of a helping behavior. And we find a main effect, which we then replicate into a bunch of different studies with different DVs. We basically see that when you deploy algorithmic management, people are less likely to want to help colleagues, which I think is an important result for a lot of organizations. Irina, I'm happy to share the slides. I can send you a deck after the presentation. And so algorithmic management can be seen as objectifying and can lead to reduced pro-social behavior. So as an organization, that is thinking to maybe deploy algorithmic management tools, so be careful what you wish for, because you might actually unintended consequences for corporate culture and employee behavior might result from that. Okay, so let me come towards the end. This is basically, again, as a sketch. In the paper in the TICS paper, what we also do at the end, which I go very quickly here, but I thought you might find it interesting. We also look at coping strategies, and we say, well, if they do experience these psychological threats, what are they going to do? Okay, and so we review the literature on coping with psychological threat and sketch a set, and we don't have empirical evidence on the prevalence of any of this, so this is conceptual work actually, but building on a lot of work in other contexts. And so we sketch a few, and some of them highlighted in green because they're positive resolution strategies, both for the worker and the organization. So for example, direct resolution would be the active pursuit of new skills in response to this changing technological environment, adapting workflows to fit the technology. An example could be a middle manager taking a prompt engineering course to be a proficient user of Gen AI. You have other types of strategies too that can be effective. One could be fluid compensation, which is to try to understand the complementarities between humans and machines and say, well, if the machines are getting really good at this, let me focus on that, which is a part that maybe the machine is not doing that great. And so, for example, you can imagine a marketing manager seeing a lot of content creation moving to machines and thinking, well, I may focus more on strategy development and then those kind of areas where I don't see really Gen AI taking the lead anytime soon. So that could be another way of dealing with this threat. But you can also imagine more negative reactions. One could be escapism. Now, I'm spending the whole day scrolling, doom scrolling on my phone because I feel basically, threatened by this environment and I withdraw. Or you could imagine dissociation. I basically avoid Gen AI. I even resist and actively sabotage it. So you can imagine a graphic designer sabotaging a firm's AI effort in an attempt to basically retain their position. So this is, obviously not something that is going to be good for the organization trying to deploy AI and probably not good for the worker either in the long term. So key takeaways, and I'll end here. Gen AI is changing the psychology of work, and skills, control, social connection, everything is affected. And effective integration into organizational workflows are going to require an attention not only to the technology and its capabilities, the data, the systems, and all of that, but also to the psychology of workers that might be affected by that deployment. Because the first without the second is not likely to work if then workers do not get along, basically, with your efforts. So what are the benefits? What are the threats for workers? Can you explain, identify them? For whom and when? Can you try to map, basically, as an organizational psychologist, what might be the type of workers experiencing what kind of threats and why? And then can you try to take steps to actively promote adaptive coping? And so how do you try to lead people to experience more direct solution and fluid compensation kind of coping responses? Okay. That's it. I also put a picture of our book, came out last year. It's a psychologist view on the analytics function for those who are interested in AI and decision making, and an invitation to connect on LinkedIn if you are not connected already. Would love to keep that conversation.